So my panel is shrinking, but hopefully I can bring you some value. I think Mr. Crowley with Mint Bank is going to join us shortly. So welcome, everybody. Thank y'all so much for joining us. I know you got to be Zoomed out, but I really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll take just a few minutes and go through a few items. And I apologize, one of our panelists had a sort of a business emergency at the last minute, so Lisa's not able to join us, but I have a lot of data here to share, and hopefully Mr. Crowley with Mint Bank will join us here shortly, but I'll get started. And Daniello, if you'll help me, just interrupt me at any time with a question in the chat, and we will just stop and try as best we can. So first of all, as you guys know, I'm the founder of Network in Action. I am not an SBA expert. I'm not a banker. I'm not a lawyer. I am not an SBA lender. However, we want to try to always add value. So there's lots of information out there and lots of things flying around. It's being updated regularly. As late as yesterday, the SBA made some changes. The Senate passed a new bill. So I'm going to go through two different points. And I want to start what I hopefully might be the first one that had the most impact. Many of you probably applied for the EIDL from the SBA in the last month or two. And you heard the word grant tossed around a lot. It really wasn't a grant, but it was a disaster loan. And at first they told all of us we were going to get up to $10,000. So I know a bunch of people that went out and started charging their credit cards to run their business, hoping to get that $10,000. And it turned out to be $1,000 per employee. So if you got that loan, that portion is not have to be paid back. So let's say you had 3 employees and you got $3,000. Subsequent to that activity, you either received an email or you will receive an email. And as early as this morning, I had a member saying, is this spam? It's the craziest thing you've ever seen from like the federal government. Not the craziest thing, but it's certainly on par. Let's put it that way. The email looks like spam, and you're seeing a lot of chat on social media. Is this spam? It's not. And one of the ways you know it's not spam is it has your EIDL number up in the top. But basically, is that Mr. Crowley?
Yeah, Crowley's in.
How you doing? Thanks for joining us. Alan, thank you. Can you unmute Alan Danielle and keep him unmuted along with me? Alan Crowley. So basically, that email says something to the effect that you have recently applied for an SBA loan. Click here to complete your portal. Now, when I saw that email, I thought to myself, well, I've gotten my $1,000. That's all I'm going to get, or my $3,000 or whatever, and I'm done here. So I sort of ignored it. And then in discussions with others, hello, Alan, in discussions with others, I found out that that was not spam. And so when you go back to that email and you click on it and you begin to create your portal, the SBA very well may have set aside funds, significant funds, based on a number of factors that don't seem to always be disclosed, but credit and history and amount of your revenue in your company and some other things that they have data on. They've set aside additional funds. So in my case, it was $46,000. It is a 3.75% interest. It's paid over 30 years. And my note monthly is $198. So the first thing I would say to you is if you got an EIDL and you are looking at getting further funds from these programs, by all means, look for that email or search out that email and click on your portal and complete the data. That does not give you the loan. That just puts you in line to get the documents and the paperwork. So I completed that last Friday. I have not received the paperwork, but at the point in time that you get the paperwork, you can then decide how much of that money they've set aside for you wish to take. So in my case, I'm not required to take the whole $46,000. I can take on a sliding scale, and it has a little bar, and you slide it down and you take, what you want. It also doesn't guarantee that you get it, but it indicates that they've set aside this amount for you. So before I go any further, are there just any questions about that portion of the EIDL and how you access that email? Let me say one last thing before we take questions. If you got that email and for some reason you can't find it, Believe it or not, the SBA answers the phone. I was only on hold about 3 minutes, and I got hold of a person, and they forwarded the email right back to me. And I know that wasn't sort of like happenstance. This was Friday about 3 o'clock because I got on the phone with 2 other people close to me, and I told them the story, and I stayed on with them while they got on the phone with the SBA to get the email sent back to them. So if you got an EIDL, in summary, you should be getting an email from the SBA saying to go complete your portal. It doesn't say go here to see if there are more funds, which will make a whole lot of sense. It says go here to complete your portal. So I just want to clear up that. There may be some a lifeline for some of you there. So before I go any further, questions about that, Daniela?
So Dosia Michaels-Meyer asked, if you already received an EIDL loan, is this not an additional loan on top of that? Is it?
So the initial EIDL, if you remember, they came out and they said every business was going to get $10,000. And what happened after you applied for that, then a lot of people heard that you didn't have to pay that back. So they started calling that a grant, but it really wasn't a grant, though it didn't have to be paid back. Subsequent to that, there was sort of a pause and then no word from the SBA. And then they just started sending $1,000 per employee to each customer. So if you had 1 employee, or if you were self-employed, you got $1,000. If you had 5 employees, you got $5,000. So that portion, most of the time, has probably been put into your bank account.
Mike asked, I have not received the EIDL, but got this. Should I have received the EIDL?
It depends on when you applied.
Okay. From Eileen.
Early March, Scott.
Sorry?
I applied in early March, the first week.
Early March? Yeah, have you, so you're a solo employer, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, go back and check your bank account, make sure they didn't drop $1,000 in there.
I looked.
Yeah. So I would call the SBA.
Okay.
Yeah, I would call them. Go ahead, Daniela.
All right, from Eileen, we've been told that the EIDL grant has been subtracted from your PPP loan forgiveness. Is this still the case, especially since we are using the PPP loan for payroll and rent and the EIDL grant for business expenses?
So I'm going to table that just for 1 minute because I want to talk about the PPP and the sort of the combination there, and I'm going to let Alan jump in here in 1 second. So I'll come back to that. But this little segment, I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes that there may be additional funds set aside for you in the EIDL, and it comes to you in a very benign email. Okay? So anything pertinent to that right now? And we're going to jump into some other topics.
Okay. From Mr. Andrews, 1,000. I got 1,000 in EIDL on my account. Only email is from 32 days ago saying they are processing it. Nothing about the portal or anything. Just call the SBA at this point.
I would call the SBA or be on the lookout for that email.
Is it too late to apply for the EIDL?
Alan, I'm going to let you jump in here if you know, because I have gotten 2 pieces of conflicting information. But what I understand is unless you're in agriculture, it is too late to start the process on the EIDL. Is that what you understand?
I don't know a whole lot about the EIDL. I know a lot more about the PPP loan, but I believe, from what I have heard, I think you're correct.
So you can always go to the SBA's website, but according to Forbes magazine as of yesterday, and also my source that I checked, that right now it's sort of a moot point because if you have not applied, the SBA is taking applications for agricultural businesses only. Now that could change. Keep in mind, legislation's happening. You know, there's things happening every day. So stay fluid. Other questions, Daniela, pertinent to this?
A lot of comments. A lot of people co-signing that the SBA actually does have good customer support, and I could co-sign that.
Yeah.
I was on the phone in about 2 minutes. Let me see. From Dosia, I received my EIDL loan at the end of April.
A little louder, Daniela.
Oh, from Dosia, I received my EIDL loan at the end of April, but no details on when payments start.
Awesome. So have you completed the paperwork there? So
Yes.
The steps are they make the funds available to you, then you sort of accept them or accept the basic premise of them, and then they send you the paperwork, and then the funds are dispersed. So Okay, what I'd like to do is just move another couple of minutes here about a few other features of the EIDL, and then I'm going to turn it over to Alan and talk about the PPP. So a couple of things about the EIDL. If you decide to take a significant amount of money on this loan, though the terms are great, 30 years and 3.75, and there's a lot of hair on it. So make sure you're aware of what you're going to do. So the first 12 months, the promissory note is when your payment would start. Loans smaller than 200,000 can be approved without a personal guarantee, but if you go over 25,000, then the SBA is going to attach a security interest to collateral in your business. So think about that, and Alan can speak to this as a great banker. If I've got something tied to my company, and I in a year try to go to Alan at Mint Bank and say, hey, I want to borrow $250,000, that may affect what I can do. So think about how much of the money do you want to pay? Do you want it to be collateralized? And recognize that that there are some stipulations of how you can use it. You can't go out and buy a piece of land in the hill country, once you get it. Okay, questions around the EIDL if you do take a larger chunk of money. As I understand, it's up to $2 million possibility. But you cannot transfer any of the collateral that's tied to that loan during the term of that payment. So keep that in mind. Any questions, Daniela, before we start talking about the PPP?
Let me see. From someone, can I pay debt with the EIDL loan?
So there is some great information out there on the SBA's website, and there are some pretty stringent rules. So here's what it cannot be used for: dividends and bonuses, disbursements to owners, repayment of stockholder, expansion of facilities, replacement of physical damage. You cannot refinance long-term debt. You can't pay off pre-existing loans. And without written consent, you can't pay you can't relocate without written consent. So that means you can pay fixed debt, payroll, accounts receivable, and some bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. So that's sort of a 40,000 foot level, but I'm not an expert enough to tell you what you can and can't. So I would check with your CPA. But at the 40,000 foot level, that's the answer.
I also had a similar question when I called the SBA.
A little louder, Daniela.
I'm sorry. I also had a similar question when I called the SBA, and it was a lot more pointed though. But they were able to answer it immediately, and they went in the actual document and told me which line it's on and why. So they're very well versed on the document. So I definitely give the SBA a call.
Great. Any other questions around that, Danielle, on the EIDL?
Oh wow. Let's see. Would you be specific? Is the overage of 25K? Is the overage of 25K? Is it at 25K or starting at $25,001?
Oh, that's a good question. But when you talk to them to get the money, they'll tell them. But so it's the way it reads. It says for loans above $25,000, the SBA takes a general security interest in any collateral.
Yeah, and I can tell you that's going to be 1 cent over 25,000.
Awesome.
All right. I don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay, great. So let me introduce Mr. Alan Croley, my good buddy, who is a Network in Action member and president of Mint Bank here in Houston, Texas. Alan is a great guy and has firsthand experience way more than he wants to with the PPP. How many did y'all end up doing? Alan would be considered a small bank, though asset-wise, where is Mint Bank, Alan?
We're about a well, before all this happened, we were about a $250 million bank. And we have actually made $100 million worth of these PPP loans.
Wow.
And so that obviously has grown the bank, but it's only a temporary growth, obviously.
Right.
I can tell you from a banker standpoint, banks do not want to hold on to a bunch of PPP loans that are not forgiven. These are unsecured loans, non-personally guaranteed loans. We have a lot of incentive to try to get these things paid off as well by the government, to have them turn into a grant. We can't do all the paperwork for you, but obviously we're going to be reviewing the application. There is going to be a secondary application. Anybody that got a PPP loan knows that they had to fill out an application for it, send in some supporting documentation, probably more than you had even thought you were going to have to do at the very beginning. Typical government loan, hey, we've got 2-page document. That's all it is, but that's not what it really is. It is all put together like that. We had to collect people's, if they had a payroll service, we had to get their payroll. Many times the easiest thing to do was to use the 940 IRS 940 form that reports all of your income from the previous year. 941s are the quarterlies, the 940 is the annual. That was a very easy tool to use when we were doing a lot of these. So now you've got a PPP loan and you're approaching, you know that you have to use the funds in the first 8 weeks. And Scott, I think you talked about this earlier. It's my understanding, unless, I have quite honestly, I hadn't looked at the news the last couple of days, but it's my understanding that the House of Representatives, not the Senate yet, the House of Representatives have, they voted on and passed a bill that changes some of the requirements or availabilities under the PPP loan.
That's correct. Let me jump in here, Alan, if I can. I'm going to turn it back over to you. So as of yesterday afternoon, the Senate actually did pass it. So it's waiting for the president's signature, but I'll give you 5 little talking points of what it changes for us business owners that have received the PPP. Number 1, originally 3/4 of the loan must have been used for payroll. They're going to lower that to 60%. So if you've got a company that you haven't brought employees back, but you're back paying your office expense, you now have a 60-40 split to make that still not have to pay it back. They're going to extend the amount of time. So the forgiveness window is going to be 24 weeks now, which is great. It's going to help Alan as a banker to get more of these loans and not have to be paid back, but it's going to help us as business owners not have to pay them back because we have more time. We'll have 24 weeks. It'll defer payroll taxes for the businesses that receive the PPP loans, and it gives you more time to rehire workers. The loan terms, Alan, you're going to hate this, have been extended to 5 years. So it makes the payment period a lot longer. You'll have to carry those notes on your books a lot longer. But let me address one thing. If you haven't gotten a PPP loan, there's still time, right, Alan?
Yeah, there's still, as long as there's still money left. And right now there is still money left. I don't know how much it is. I had a deal, $50,000 PPP loan that was approved last Friday, I believe it. No, yeah, last Friday. So I know that there was some money left, obviously. And if you're still waiting on your funding for PPP, and there are some at our bank, much less other banks, I'm sure there still are, there just seems to be a backlog. The backlog seems to be in 2 phases: getting the documents out to you to sign, and then once you've signed and sent them back, getting it funded. I know our bank's a small bank. We only have about 35 employees in the entire bank, and we really have 2 people that are preparing the notes and funding those same notes. So we have you can see there's a big backlog. We've, and just kind of tell you briefly, we did about $100 million in PPP loans at our bank, and the number of employees that helped was around 10,000. And I don't know, it was probably 900 loans or something like that. It was quite a few. So just a lot of work. Yeah. And that's just so we've got the back end coming up, and I'm glad to hear the outcome of what the Congress did, because I know there for a while it didn't look like the Senate was going to pick it up, and I'm glad that at least they made a decision. So whether I like the decision or not is a different story.
Yeah.
The whole point of this was really to keep people employed. not to use the funds for, go to Vegas or something like that. And obviously, if you do that, there could be some penalty.
Right.
But the biggest thing, we have just received, or I guess a week ago or so, we received, I guess, the first draft of the SBA came out with the loan forgiveness application for the PPP loan. And I don't know, some people may have already seen it. I certainly have. I've not studied it all, but I've read through it a little bit. And I'll just be very honest with you. It looks like you're filling out your tax return. I mean, it's not going to be just straightforward. It's going to be one of these things. There's a forgiveness. Sitting here looking at it right now. There's a forgiveness application form. There's a Schedule A where it asks you to do some background work that will fold into the application. And then Schedule A has a worksheet for you to utilize to help you fill out Schedule A. So it's going to be one of these things where, line 13 on this page needs to go on line 2 on the previous page, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of following that back and forth. One of the things you're going to need to do is you've got to be able to prove up your full-time equivalences. That is probably the biggest trip up, if you will, that some people may find that they have. It reads several different ways. It's not straightforward. Whatever number of FTEs you claimed on your initial PPP loan application, you've got to be able to keep the same number of FTEs or higher by the end of the period that you have to use the funds. Used to be 4 weeks. Now, I guess it's, what'd you say, 24 weeks now?
24, yes, sir.
So by the end of that time period, you're going to have to be able to prove that you still have the same number of FTEs. If you have fewer FTEs, that's where you're going to get in trouble. I mean, you're not going to get in trouble like you're, going to get sued. The trouble is going to be they're going to penalize you when you're trying to get the entire loan forgiven. They're going to forgive a portion of it and then won't forgive a portion of it. And that will be your penalty. You will have to pay back a portion of that loan. It will not be granted in full. So that's
the flip side of that would be that if you spend 60% of this money maintaining your lease and you spend 40% maintaining that payroll, you should be okay. And that's a big, yeah.
Opposite.
I'm sorry, 60% of payroll. Thank you for cleaning that up. But that's pretty substantial for people who have significant nut on their lease and haven't been able to bring back employees. So it's a nice change.
That's
awesome.
Right.
Danielle, thank you very much, Alan. Danielle, open that up for questions for us, please.
Yeah, we got a few. So starting from the top here, how can I apply with only a K1 from the business? We only take owner draws.
Well, let me answer it this way, because I've done several single member LLCs and also sole proprietors. What the SBA has told us in some of the questions that we have asked them on sole proprietorships or single person LLCs is we look at your Schedule C. If you have not filled out your 2019, if you have not filed your 2019 tax returns, which you're not required to right now, the SBA has asked us to ask our clients to go ahead and fill out a 2019 Schedule C form to utilize for the PPP application. If you think about the Schedule C, it's somewhat like a P&L statement. It's got your income, it's got your expenses, and it has a net income at the bottom. The net income at the bottom is looked upon by the SBA as that individual's take-home pay, because that's after all expenses, assuming that one of those expenses is not your salary, and I'm assuming that's not the case. So the bottom line, the net income on that Schedule C 2019 IRS Schedule C would be your annual take home for 2019. You divide that by 12 to get a monthly payroll for yourself, multiplied by 2.5 for the PPP loan. And that's the amount of loan that you would be eligible for.
And thank you, Alan, for that, because there's a little bit of confusion, and I experienced this firsthand with my wife's company. It's the exact same scenario, very small sort of cottage business. The last minute, I thought, why not? And we were accepted and approved very quickly by our bank. So a lot of people think I'm a solo entrepreneur, I don't qualify. It's not true. And while those PPP loans are still available, I would jump in. Now, I've also heard, hopefully you don't want it on here from Chase or Bank of America, but it is what it is. I've had people tell me, no, I was turned down. And as soon as I ask, it's inevitably some large bank that don't want to process some small PPP loan. So it's a great time to have a personal relationship with a banker.
Yeah, we were at the, just very briefly, we were at the monthly NIA meeting of my club this past month, and there was a question about that, and I said, the biggest thing, if you're a small business and you're banking with a large bank, you probably shouldn't. You need to, I always use the term, just like water seeks its own level, you need to seek your own level as a business to the bank that you're banking with, because one day you may need some money. You may need a little bit of an advantage over your peers. And if you have a one-on-one relationship with your banker, it's great to bank with the Wells Fargo's. They're ATM and on every corner, or bank on every corner, that's fine, but you truly are a number. The smaller of a business you are, the smaller bank I would recommend that you do business with.
Good stuff.
Good
All
advice.
right. Can we apply to any bank who is offering PPP loans?
That really comes down to the bank. There are some banks where the answer would that be no. I know Alan could talk to that about what their policy is. There are other places. I understand you can also apply through PayPal as a set of PPP loans. But Alan, talk about what y'all's policy is at Mint Bank.
Yeah, I mean, we were taking applications until the end of last week, and we have now stopped taking applications. We're basically filled up. We can't.
Yeah.
The capacity is too much for us now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can seek out. You can really call any bank in the country. Now, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for that bank to do business with you if they're up in New York and you're down here. So you probably need to try to find yourself a good community bank that's close to you somewhere here in the Houston area.
Check PayPal and QuickBooks if you use either one of those as well. Yeah. Daniela?
All right. 24-week window, meaning you no longer have to spend money on the appropriate categories in 8 weeks, but you now have 24 weeks to spend it?
No, you have an 8-week span to still start using the funds, but the forgiveness window is 24 weeks. Great question.
Okay.
Is that I have, like I said, I have not read what was passed in the Senate. So
Yeah, that was passed yesterday. Now, again, we're waiting on the president's signature, but all appearances are that's going to be the law.
So Scott, can you tell us that again? You have.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize. We're on here to give good data, and I gave you bad data. Currently, the PPP loan proceeds must be used for expenses in an 8-week span, starting when it's funded. That's current. They are increasing that forgiveness window to 24 weeks. I apologize. I misspoke. So the window from 8 weeks is being increased to 24 weeks.
So that means
basically because some businesses were reopening part way. The window was rolling, and all of a sudden you're at 8 weeks and you don't even know what the next month looks like. So I apologize. The forgiveness window is to 24 weeks.
Yeah. So that means, so that does sound like to me, it means that they have 24 weeks to use the money.
That's exactly right. And that was done to coincide with, they can't very well tell us to stay at home and then have us these loans that have to be rebuilt, we can't reopen. So,
yeah, I have to tell you my opinion about that, and my opinion is not worth anything, really, but my opinion about that is that was the wrong move to make. There are businesses that were not able to open, and some of those business owners actually did the wrong thing and held that money back. And that is not what this funding was all about. Funding was to pay people, basically to pay your employees to stay at home. I mean, that's really what it was all about, because there were so many businesses. Just talk about a restaurant, employees of a restaurant. Well, the restaurants were open, so it was to pay those employees while they weren't working so they could still pay their bills.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there were a lot of businesses that held money back, and they said, hey, we may need to use this money for other purposes. It really wasn't the purpose of what it was all intended for, but this is our government at work.
Yeah. Okay,
All right,
Daniela?
We got a lot of questions, guys. So this one's for Alan. Alan, when you talk about PPP, can you specifically address this forgiveness aspect that applies to a 1099? The only forms I see from the government on this loan forgiveness application are really geared to companies, employees, payrolls, etc.
So I suppose the person that's asking this question is a 1099 recipient. And if that is the case, that recipient of the 1099, they are applying for the PPP loan for themselves, as if they are their own sole proprietor. And that's how that works. So again, your 1099 for that time period is going to be your payroll. If you actually did it in 8 weeks, then you've got the proof of that. Or if you don't have the 1099, I would keep copies of the checks. If you don't do in checks, you can do paperless. Then make sure that you keep copies of your bank records that show the transactions that were for payroll for yourself.
Alan, I specifically asked that question. It's specifically asking it on the forgiveness side of it. The loan forgiveness application doesn't talk anything about 1099. It talks about payroll. It talks about employees. It talks about tax this and tax that. All as a 1099 that I'm doing is trying to recoup my own salary. And it doesn't look like there's any forms that address that.
I'm not sure. Are you talking about in the forgiveness side, or are we talking about it?
I'm talking about the forgiveness.
Yeah, I read through. If you've read through the same forgiveness application stuff that I've read through, I agree. I don't see anything that talks about the 1099. You've got to still prove, or you've got to be able to have your own records of some sort of that you use those funds for those purposes intended, and let's just say payroll. And if you're not issuing yourself a 1099 in midstream, which who would do that really? And I mean, I guess you could, then the burden of proof is still on you. So you either have need to issue yourself checks that you cash, or if you do it paperless, then you need to keep the record, in your checking account. Your bank records. If you have a business account and you move it over into your personal account, that would be really easy. There are some people that are opening up their own a brand new account to do the accounting all in that one account. It's not necessary, but I guess it's probably a smart way of doing it. So
I guess the specific question is on the application for forgiveness. Nowhere in there does it talk about a 1099 and how you fill it out for a person in my situation, which there has to be a lot of others. It talks about payroll. It talks about taxes. It talks about employees. So I'm just one person recouping my income.
yeah,
That's the part that I don't understand, that the forgiveness application doesn't address that anywhere that I can see.
there is one place on there that it talks about, I think this is line 9 of Schedule A. It talks about, this is where you put the total amount paid to an owner employee. And that's where you would put that figure. Now, to back up that figure, that's what I was talking about, is keep some types of records.
Check your chat.
So we're going a bit further in the weeds here. I got a question. So you have 24 weeks to draw that 2.5 times number back out of salary, or it's capped at 75% payroll and the rest has to be other than payroll on the year approved list.
Well, with the changes, it sounds like, it has been the original requirements where you have to use 75% of the total money that you got for payroll. They have just changed that. It is now 60% of the money that you received. So now you have 40% that can be used for those other purposes: rent, utilities, interest on business loans that were out there prior to all of this. So that part has changed a little bit.
Okay. And so do we need to have a profit in 2019 Schedule C to get PPP? We have an LLC with pass-through tax.
I guess the answer would be yes. If you have a loss, well, let me back up. In the Schedule C, there is a line for depreciation and amortization. I look at that as, that's a non-cash expense. So if you take your net income, or in this case, a net loss, and add the depreciation back and amortization back, that might give you a positive figure, and that positive figure is what you would use at that point. Yeah, that's the only kind of glitch, I guess, in regards to a Schedule C, is any non-cash expenses that the IRS normally allows you to use to lower your tax burden. If you still have a loss, yeah, I'm pretty much afraid that you're out of luck.
Okay. Alan, can you also address forgiveness as it relates to a 1099 and the expenses part, i.e. home, office, also car expenses in there anywhere?
Well, personal expenses are not allowed. So if the car is in your personal name, it's probably not going to be allowed. Now, if you utilize your car for your business expenses, business purposes, and you use that in the schedules, I think there's a page 2 of Schedule C where you can itemize that out, how many miles and that kind of thing. If you do that, then you could probably claim those certain number of miles. I think if you go into the 2019 tax, like the 1099 instructions, it would tell you how much you can claim per mile, so many cents per mile, 55 cents or whatever it is per mile. And if you're able to keep good records during this period on your automobile, I would assume that you probably could, because you could claim that as a business expense.
Let me, if I can, Alan, I'll play devil's advocate here. And I certainly agree with you. I think that's certainly a game plan. But if you think about it, you've got 6 months left in the year. This might be a good time to clean that up so that you can just clearly show that you took income as a salary during the next 24 weeks. It's going to be really easy to prove that.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got 24 weeks to use the money rather than 8 weeks to use the money, personally, I would just use it all for payroll. Yeah. That would be so much easier. That way you want to show, because I was looking at some of the documents that you're going to have to give to the bank to prove up that what used to be 25%, now it's 40% that's non-payroll. You're going to have to, give records of your utility bills and your, a copy of your lease and a copy of your bank statement that shows that you paid your rent every month. And so it's a little bit more, there's a lot more paperwork involved if you
definitely
utilize all the other expenses. So yeah, if you've got 24 months to use those funds instead of 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks, probably the easiest thing for you proving up everything was just to use it all for payroll.
Daniela?
All right, what if I applied with 15 employees and when we returned back to work, only 13 came back, they decided not to work with us anymore? Will I be penalized for them not coming back, meaning will my loan not be totally forgiven?
Well, it's a loaded question, and let me kind of answer it this way. If you don't replace them with anybody and you keep only 13 instead of the 15 that you started with, the answer is yes, you will be penalized. There is nothing that I have read that says that the 15 FTEs that you had before, using your example, have to be the exact same people. If you want to hire 4 more people and all 4 of those work 20-hour weeks. 20-hour week is a half of an FTE. So those 4 people would equal 2 FTEs, which would replace you that you lost. My recommendation to you would be somehow, some way, hire enough employees and don't decrease the number of employees. Stay the same or increase. You're not going to get any bonus points for increasing, but at least keep the number of employees. I mean, I don't want to shout this out to everybody, but things like if you know you're going to lose somebody and you really don't need to replace that particular job description, well, maybe there's something else that you need done. You've got an office that's just really cluttered and you needed somebody to come in and organize it for you. Hire them on for a short period of time and utilize that FTE. So,
Okay, what if you own multiple businesses? Can you apply for each?
yes, you can, but
Okay.
it's a separate application for each.
Have you seen the website launched by Mark Cuban and bank CEO PPP Bank that has an automated SBA PPP loan forgiveness application with calculations? It's free to use. Okay.
I have not. No.
Sounds interesting. All right. Is it that you can't spend more than 75% on payroll, or that you can't spend less than 75% on payroll? And you got to thank you there.
It's that you cannot spend less. Now, again, that 75% has just it's not passed until, or it's not a law until the president signs. But if he does sign it, this change, that 75% has been dropped to 60%. But if you want to use all of the 100% of the funds for payroll, no problem. It's just not less than that larger percentage.
Okay. And I apologize, I have a crying baby in the background. But if my loan was for 2 months of payroll and I have 24 weeks to spend it, then I won't need any other expenses to meet the disbursement requirements. It'll be payroll, right?
That's fine. Yeah, 100% is fine. Yeah.
Okay. For self-employed individuals, are you able to use 100% of the loan for payroll once the forgiveness period is increased to 24 weeks?
Yes, absolutely. Whether you're 1 employee or 500 employees, you can use 100% of the funds for 100% of payroll. Sure.
How do I find my EIDL claim account number? I received email on May 2nd from the SBA saying the application was still in process. Nothing since.
I don't know much about EIDL. Scott, do you have an answer for that?
And repeat the question, Danielle. I apologize. I was reading the chat.
Okay. How do I find my EIDL claimant number? I received an email on May 2nd from the SBA saying my application was still in process. Nothing since. When I log into the SBA to manage my account, it only shows my email, no account number.
I would never answer this way to any question you ask me about the government, but I'm telling you, they're answering the phone. I would call them. I know 8, 10, 12 people who I've referred this to, and they've all coming back. Wow, they answered the phone. I wasn't on hold for an hour and a half.
Okay. Do you know if fuel costs for van fleet and waste collection expenses are part of utilities?
I do not, but that's a CPA question, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
We lost you, Daniela. Daniela, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In regard to Matthew Paul's question about needing to have profit in 2019 Schedule C to get PPP, I thought 2019 taxes are not even due until July 15th now. How or why would this matter for PPP?
When banks started submitting questions to some of the groups that we are affiliated with that deal with the SBA, one of the questions was, how are we going to deal with sole proprietorships and single purpose LLCs? They don't pay, they don't have payroll. And the answer that we got back was the following. They said, utilize the 2019 Schedule C. Even if the person has not filed their taxes yet, utilize the Schedule C form in the 2019 tax schedules as as your balance sheet. Now, if you have an internal, like if you do QuickBooks or something like that, and you already have it, you can utilize that. It's probably not as good because, there's, I hate to say it, but some people don't necessarily tell the truth on their internal documents, and they or the truth when they file their taxes. And so for a banker, even a small bank, we a lot of times we'll utilize the tax returns as a better form or more truthful form than their internal documents. But yeah, even if you have to answer the question, even if you have not filed your 2019 tax returns, the 2019 Schedule C form is what you have to use, or it's the best form to use.
Yeah. And I have a question. So my takeaway is that the way this should be treated, if you're an independent contractor, you probably want to just supplement your payroll. Yeah. Now, since the previous year and current year, I'm still working as an independent contractor on the side, except I've actually taken on a JOB. So how would I still be supplementing payroll? Maybe it's a question of ethics in that case.
Yeah, you're not really supposed to give yourself a raise. This is to really keep you level from where you were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We have the SBA phone number and website and the EIDL SBA number posted in the chat. If anybody wants to grab that up, it's 800-827-5722. And
The number that I can recommend that they answer is the EIDL number. Any other questions, Daniela?
By God, it looks like we are caught up. If anybody has anything else they want to drop in the chat or chime in, please feel free.
Alan, I can't thank you enough for your expertise and for your time here. I really appreciate it. I cannot imagine how busy you are taking on all this obligation to help your customers get these loans that you never expected, last 13 weeks ago. So great job. Thanks for being on here. I want to end real quick with just one comment. We've got a lot of craziness going on. Who knows what COVID-19 is taking a back seat to all of the marches and things going on. But I just want to say as the founder of Network in Action, what hits home for me is one thing only. Today, more than ever, nothing is more important than the relationships you build and have. So keep building great relationships. Keep trying to help people. It'll come back to you. And I appreciate all y'all taking time to be on here. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you,
Thank
Scott. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.